close, near, and dear to my heart because it is something I struggle with, and I'm sure we all struggle with in a really high achieving community that we live in, many of us. So I will just say, Stan and I actually hosted a dinner party recently on this topic. And it was fascinating. We had about 8 people around the table to hear what everybody was saying about their struggles with extracurricular balance, what they were noticing with their kids, with themselves, with their marriages. And if you are interested, let me know. I'll throw in the chat. I wrote up a summary of it. So if you want to kind of be able to eavesdrop on what people were saying, I'll throw this in the chat at the end so you guys can see it. But let's get started. I think our key takeaways today is just what is some of the research on mental health around extracurricular activities, thinking about your long-term vision and purpose around what you choose to sign up for with your family and children, the importance of letting the child lead, and then also setting your family boundaries. And so we'll talk a little bit about this. And Becky, I know you're going to I'm almost just going to be like asking you questions because you have seen this play out across many families, I'm sure, in your role as an educator. So,
Absolutely. And I actually think that if you joined us last week where the topic was boundaries, that in many ways, boundaries are very, very important when it comes to your child's activity list. And just remembering that to keep yourself separate from your child. That, and I know that it's tempting to see their success as something that reflects on you or their choice of activities. But let's keep boundaries in mind throughout this little chat today.
yes, and we're going to speak a lot more to that actually, Becky. So
Okay,
we'll,
good.
we'll have a lot more to say. I think the first thing just to share is that, yes, it's actually great for our kids to be involved in extracurricular activities. It's not like we're saying all extracurricular activities are bad or, get rid of them all. It's terrible. It is good for our kids to be involved. The trick is when they get over involved and over scheduled and they burn out on an activity. And you can hear lots of stories from people who have had that happen. There's actually a new study that came out around particularly the high school level, but a lot of this begins right about now in elementary school, middle school, right, where you're committed, and so you're saying, okay, well, we're committed, we're in, we got to do it. And having too many things for kids is actually causing them a lot of stress and anxiety, not just, you know, kids who are like in travel baseball, but if you're just doing a lot every day after school, that can really have an impact, and not just on their stress and anxiety, but also their soft skills, right? Around being able to learn how to relax, being able to learn how to socialize, have that play, even sleeping. So, Becky, can you just speak a little bit to, are there things that you saw in the lower school or as you were a parent at Westminster in the middle and upper school around mental health and extracurricular activities?
Absolutely, Peyton. Of course, some of you know I was a swimmer. I swam for Emory. And so I did coach for a little while at Westminster. And swimming, and I'm sure this is true as with other sports, but my personal experience in coaching was I watched a number of students drop out in 10th grade because swimming is very intense. And the children who in 5th grade are already doing 5 days a week, even 3 days a week, sometimes they get to 10th grade and they're over it. And that's so sad because by the time they've gotten to 10th grade, they have developed quite a talent. They have good skills. Their strokes are fabulous. They have good speed. They're tired. And so I think it is important to watch. Is this sport or special activity something that is creating a tired child? Or is their enthusiasm and their zest for it growing? Their interest, they develop a great friend group. So watch that carefully and see which direction you're going with each activity.
My husband tells the story. By the time he was a senior in high school, he could either have played football at one school or baseball at another. And even though he was better at baseball, he ended up choosing football, A, because of the coaching, but B, because he was really burned out because he spent, 9 months out of the year playing baseball. And so I think that, obviously some people are like, we're doing extracurriculars because this is going to be your road to college. And for some kids, it may be, but for most kids, it won't be, particularly if it's sports. And so I think that's something to think about, right? Like, uh, that there is a cost always to whatever we're doing. There's always trade-offs, right? There's time, sleep, time for homework, time for socializing, or there's trade-offs of like maybe you won't be as good or maybe, whatever. And so I think that's something to consider, but there is a cost to mental health as well if a kid gets really overscheduled. Um, so how do we prevent that? Right? You're like, okay, well, I want my kid to be able to do extracurriculars and I want them to be able to, have a lovely life and enjoy many things. And we're really lucky, like at Westminster, you can sign them up for all kinds of things. There's robotics, there's, trips to Italy in the summer, there's sports, you name it, you've got it. And not just at Westminster, at lots of schools. And so, but how do I keep, with so many options, like a buffet, how do you keep from overeating at a buffet when you can have everything if you want it? And one thing I think that's really been helpful to think about is taking a minute to define your long-term vision or purpose in parenting or in like why answering the question, why are you signing your child up for this activity? And really being kind of thoughtful about that. So if you think about it, we're all looking for belonging and significance, right? So a lot of times we're signing kids up because we want them to feel like they're part of a team, or we want them to feel like they are good at something and that they're using their gifts well for significance, right? And this philosophy comes from positive discipline. There's also research, and we've talked about the book by Jennifer Brahaney Wallace called Never Enough, about we're all really looking for a way to matter, right? So one thing to think about is this extracurricular activity helping my child feel like they matter, right? Are they being able to be helpful? Are they contributing in a way that's unique to only they could do it, right? And so I do want Becky to speak to this, and then I would love for us, after Becky, I give you a chance, I would love for us to put in the chat, what do you really hope for your child when they are 20? What kinds of people do you want them to be? What kinds of hopes or dreams do you have? Take a second to define that. Becky, do you have anything? We'll do that kind of as we go. But Becky,
As we're talking, I think we all know that during the first 20 years, everything is easier to learn. So there is a certain desire, I think, within parents to give a gift to your child of learning how to play the violin or the piano or knowing how to swim really well. I am a very good swimmer. I'm very fast, I'm strong, and I'm very skilled. That was a gift from my parents. My parents paid for countless lessons over the years and signed me up for swim team. So I do think we have to admit that those first 20 years are a great time to learn something that sticks with you the rest of your life. I wish I had practiced the piano. My parents also invested in piano for me, but it didn't stick. I still love the piano. I sit down and I'm terrible. So to a certain extent, it is valuable even when you have the complainer on the way to piano lessons, I don't want to do this, but you have to really check your own boundaries and think, am I forcing my child to practice the piano? My parents backed out when I wasn't motivated, and they were paying money for lessons that I didn't practice for during the week. So I think this is a hard thing for parents. It's a gift you give your children if you give them 15 years of lessons. On the other hand, if they've never invested in it, make sure it's not your activity, that you're just crossing that boundary and forcing your child to do.
And I think too, and if y'all will go ahead and throw in the chat, what do you want for your children? What do you hope for them? I wrote a little bit about mine, like, you know, I don't actually care if my kids are really good at any particular extracurricular activity, but I want to support their gifts and development of that. And so, I think about like, I want my kids to be kind and to be gritty and, be able to be loyal and independent. And so I only want to sign my kids up for stuff that's going to be helping them do that. Like, can they build those uh, traits through violin or robotics or drama or soccer or chess? Absolutely. But I think for me, the minute those activities get in the way of that or aren't fostering that, then it feels like an easy conversation to have with our kids. Like, hey, what are you getting out of this? Are you feeling like you just have to perform? Um, because that's also one thing that Jennifer Brahaney Wallace talks about is like when kids just feel like they have to perform all day, they have to perform in the classroom, they have to perform on their homework, they have to perform in sports or in drama or in music. Suddenly, their whole purpose is to perform, but they don't matter outside of their performance. And that can cause a lot of those mental health issues, right? Where it's like, suddenly, if I'm not the best or if I'm not performing well, then I don't matter. And we do see a lot of that in high achieving schools.
I think I've shared this before that my daughter was the captain of the track team at Westminster, and and Charlie was on cross country, and they were enormously rewarding activities for them. And they learned how to have delayed gratification. They worked very, very hard every day after school in order to run fast at those meets. But also that my daughter would say to the coach, no, no stopwatch today. She, even at 16, was guarding her heart so that her sport would remain beloved and not just a performance. I want to run because I like running. I don't want to run so I can be better than the others, right? Maybe it's a mix of both. You want to win. Winning is great. But can you maintain, like, you still love violin after you've practiced for 15 straight years and your parents have taken you to practice for 15 years? It's a gift if you do, but if you hate it because all you did was try to perform and you missed the mark or it didn't fulfill you, that's hard.
And I think too, Becky, when our kids are just starting out, like we have littler kids in lower school or middle school, they're trying it, and trying something is really hard. Like learning to play an instrument is brutal. You got to get over that hump. So yes, if your kid is like, I hate it, you got to kind of be like, yes, I'm going to drag you for the first year through this because you've got to get over that first learning hurdle.
Yes.
But once they're over the first learning hurdle, if you're dragging them, ask them about their hopes for themselves. What do they want? Right? Because we have a friend whose son wants to play professional baseball. And he has said, okay, well, if that is your hope and dream, then I'm going to do what I can to help create, forge that path for you and get some boundaries out of the way so that you can do that. And he's not the one pushing his child, like, you've got to play professional baseball, right? But I think if it's coming from the child, then they have a lot more motivation as well, right? like you said.
I received very good advice from a panel of women when I was a young mother that said expose your children to a number of things, not just what you're interested in. Kind of give them a little smorgasbord so they can see if they're interested in it, but then don't keep it up if they are lackluster and complain and what have you,
Yeah.
right?
And I thank y'all for putting your thoughts in the chat. It's really beautiful and helpful to see what you've written. It looks like I see things like self determination and being able to act on their world with efficacy.
I love these
Um,
comments.
yeah, to have resilience and feel loved and have a sense of purpose, to be motivated and to have a close group of healthy friendships. I think it's interesting whenever I do this exercise with adults, never do I see first in their class, top 10%, best, travel sports team, or, highest, most often leading role in the play. Like I never see that. And so I think that these long-term visions and purpose can really help us in our own way put guidelines or boundaries around our signups, because it'll help us think, what are we doing? Um, Taking a look at, letting the child lead. I think there's this little bit of parents, right? And Becky, you may have encountered this too, right? In the beginning of parenting, you going, okay, well, my kid is 3. Let's sign him up for karate and soccer and violin and cello and chess, and let's just see what they're into. And that's all fine because those practices are usually like for 45 minutes once a week. Okay, no big deal, right? But suddenly, if you continue all of those things into elementary school, and I'm facing this, like I have a son who plays soccer, and we went from 1 hour of practice a week and 1 hour of a game a week to now we are at practice sometimes 5 days a week, for an hour and a half each day. And then also 2 to 3 games per weekend every weekend. And I'm like, how did this one activity completely take over my life? And I am now starting to be like, okay, this might not be the league for us, or this might not be the team for you. But I need to have a conversation with him. Like, is this the thing that he loves? Right. Or is he just like, yeah, I'll do it. And so I think too, being able to talk with your children as they get older around, all right, what out of these plethora of activities that you've gotten exposed to when you were little, are you now thinking like, okay, what do I love? What do I want to spend time doing? Um, Becky, do you have any advice for how to get in with kids around that?
Well, I do think it's important just to say, is it fun? Are you having fun? Because these activities are supposed to be fun. You also don't forget there are some children who don't want to do anything. There are some children who say, no. I had one of them and I said, you're picking a sport and every semester and there's going to be one. What's it going to be? And so you have to see who your child is. And I like your title, Let the Child Lead. So some children want to be in everything and some children want to be in nothing. And so you still have to be the adult. You have to monitor when it's an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week, then you say, I wonder if there's a different league that is less intense. I know in swimming, there are some leagues that you can go to once a week. And there are others where if you're a certain age, you're going 3 days a week, no questions asked. So find the program that fits your family. And also the one thing I wanted to say is when I was a kid, I was one of 5 children, and we picked the activities we wanted. And my parents came to our meets or they didn't come. One really good example is if your child is performing, if they're terribly upset that you didn't show up at the performance, that clues you in that it is performance oriented. They're doing it for you rather than for themselves. I don't believe that parents need to attend every meet or every performance. And maybe I'm a little traditional on that, but that's where the rubber hits the road. Does Does your child do it for them because they enjoy it, because it's fun, because they have good friends, they're learning good skills? Or are they doing it to make you proud?
Yeah.
And you don't show up at that meet and they're broken.
Yeah, Becky, that is such good advice. And it also like think about how much more free time you'd have if you didn't go to everything.
I mean, my parents had 5 kids. They could not go to everybody's everything.
Yeah.
So I got a ride home from a lot of swim meets and had no parent watching me.
Yeah. And so
Um,
that brings up the next thing about setting your family boundaries because and this is I think that a lot of times we miss this because we're part of the culture of just like oh well everybody's doing it or if you want to get into a good college then you've got to do blah 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 or if you right and then suddenly you get sucked into this vortex of wow how is everyone else keeping up with this lifestyle because I just can't right and I think setting your family boundaries and talking with your kids and your family around what those might be, that's a really helpful framing then to use as a guidelines for is this the right activity for us, not just individually for my child, but also for my whole family. And I think, obviously things like, is my child getting enough sleep, particularly as they get into high school? That becomes a real issue or how many hours of sleep am I going to require for my child like am I okay with my child only getting going to bed at 9 on a weeknight if they're in fourth grade or do I want them in bed at 8 and what does that mean then in terms of what we can sign up for also things like family time right like um do you have time to have conversations with your kids about things other than logistics and if that's important to you, then how are those extracurriculars allowing that in terms of your time? Same thing for family meals, very similar. I also added in there the parents' mental and physical health. Becky's boundary about not attending everything, like that is that's just a relief. Thank you.
if you have 3 or more children, attending everybody's everything is going to be really draining. And think about your own boundaries and if it's okay to miss once and for your child to know that you love them, you're proud of them, but you hope that they're enjoying their sport for themselves.
And I think too, there's also questions like, okay, how much more driving is this going to put on me as a parent? How much money is this going to cost? And does my child know? A lot of times, we have a family of friends who their son played a really competitive sport all through high school. They never went on a family vacation, and the minute he graduated, he stopped. And it, for those parents, they were like, "What did we sacrifice?
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
did we sacrifice all of that for that?" And so, yeah,
I love the way many of these comments are like, we want our family to honor God. And I think that you are teaching your children moral courage if you evaluate a situation with them and help them decide that it's not been honoring and allowing them to let it go. Because that gives them a skill for later in life when they're in college and they've overcommitted and they understand that they are allowed to reevaluate and they're allowed to say, is this honoring God and his purposes for me? Do I feel like I'm thriving? Is this good for me? Um, and teaching them that skill to say, okay, it's not, and I'm allowed to shut it down.
yeah, yeah.
That's moral courage. It's very hard in our society. Of course, we don't want to teach quitting. On the other hand, we need to teach our children how to evaluate something that's not healthy and make a change.
Yeah. Another thing to think about too is the other siblings, like what impact, is your third child going to be drug around to 150 events for the first child and what impact does that have on them? And, having conversations with your family about stuff like this, I think is important. Um,
I did eventually hire, for 2 years, I hired an Emory student to stay at the house while I carted someone else to their activities because I did feel like the other two were sitting in the car a lot and waiting a lot. And whereas waiting's a good thing, sometimes it's too much. And so that was helpful for me, kind of in the thick of things, to have this Emory student who's beloved and still in our life, who stayed at the house while I did whatever activity was necessary that day.
So before we close, I just want to have an open opportunity for anybody who either wants to turn on their video and, add a thought or anything like that, or if you want to throw something in the chat. Is there anything on your mind or things that you're struggling with or you're thinking about right now, just as we close?
We would love to hear from you guys.
And no pressure, though, totally.
All right.
Well, no worries. We are obviously, quick disclaimer, Becky's a doctor, but not a therapist doctor. I'm not even a doctor. But again, we do have good advice every now and then. And if you need a game plan, Becky is here. She is an amazing parent coach and would love to help you or anybody else who, has wants a little bit further discussion on this
Yeah,
case.
I love sitting down with families one-on-one and kind of coming up with a strategy when there's an issue or just planning the year out. It helps to have somebody who's objective, sit down with the parents. But and Peyton's knocking it out of the park with her school workshops. Good job.
Well, next up, we're going to have managing election season and other current events. So, what do you do when your kid comes home or is hearing stuff on the news or the radio? Or what do I do when I'm hearing stuff on the news or the radio and I'm dysregulated? And so that's going to be coming up. We've got other great sessions coming up. Please forward to your friends and let them know that they can jump on.
Yeah, if Mary Margaret is here, I know you had something to add, so we hope you'll be here next week and share some of the learnings that you had when you attended that session.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.